To start with number one, I think probably the best example would be something like Wikipedia, right? Which many of us use, almost everybody. And as you know, the story of Wikipedia, first as Newpedia, which is supposed to be this online dictionary, right, where content was submitted, edited, and sent for approval before publishing. Didn't work, as you may know, and then forked off as into Wikipedia, which was essentially the management tool for the process, and that grew and thrived. And if you look at the number of editors in Wikipedia from day one to today, over 1.5 million today, right? So the principle of anyone can participate drives quality content, and we've seen that play out, and we've all encountered that in our daily lives.
And when we apply that to business, the case study in the book is Intuit that used social customer care where anyone could help anyone else's tax problems and allowed them to disrupt their number one competitor and number one company in the industry, H&R Block. And the core principle of that social customer care process is that anyone can try and solve a customer problem. And tens of millions of people have received help through live community. It's been very effective to move them from number 2 in the industry to number 1. And we see this over and over and over again. When you limit participation, you limit results. When you maximize participation, really remarkable things can happen. So tenet number 2 is create shared value by default. You want everyone participating, but that better enrich the entire community, not just the company that's receiving it. Again, the example in live community was not only does the answer that someone provided help that person, but everyone who comes later on. That's the principle of Wikipedia. The open source model for software uses this model here. Anyone can contribute.
We have 5 minutes left, man. So why don't we move on to number 3? While participation is self-organizing, we need to focus these on business outcomes. You give people social tools, they'll use it for everything, right? Their personal lives and professional. But in the business context, we have to aim this at specific outcomes. And that's the difference we see today, right? So you have IBM, who's driven $100 million in cost savings just by running an online community. You've got, Dell Outlet famously driving $3 to $5 million in direct and indirect sales using Twitter. And we see this over and over again. So the difference between yesterday and today is that there's real money to be had in social business for business outcomes.
Yep, and as we wrap this up, please think about what else you think should be on this and what's happened since then. Enlist a big enough community. That's one of the hardest things and one of the early mistakes that we saw is that people didn't have social capital, organizations didn't have a lot of followers. How are they going to get big results when they don't have tens of millions of their customers plugged into their organization? Got to get a big enough community or go to a big enough community.
That's the whole problem with the pilots, is that when you start with a small group just to experiment, you're not going to have a big enough group to make it matter. So go wide and big as fast as possible.
And engage the right community for that business purpose. When we looked at some of the examples, the ones that didn't work out very well is they tried to build a community without addressing and pulling in the right participants. One of the biggest online business communities is SAP Community Network, 2.5 million active people. And they were really good at building the community by starting with their workers, not going outside the company, but saying everyone's got to be on deck and we got to be there first or no one's going to show up. So they engaged the right community by pulling in their own subject matter experts and everyone else showed up later.
And you see this in hashtag jacking where you see people get in there and get in on some brand story. It means they're not putting the parameters in and engaging the right community.
So this is an example from the book at Toyota when they tried to address their brake, their sudden acceleration problem, and they issued press releases, whereas all their customers were talking about it in social media. They destroyed their reputation. It still has not recovered. And so it's important. You can't wait to do this. You have to start cultivating the communities for your organization now. The other thing we saw over and over again, and this is what Pete was talking about with the hashtag jacking, is participation can take any direction. You're going to try and guide it. You're going to try and aim all the folks that are contributing, whatever it is, right? Helping you create marketing, co-creating commercials, helping you with customer support. But they're going to do things you cannot imagine, right? Good and bad, and you have to be prepared for it. This is the process of community management.
This is why startups pivot, right? If you know the story about Jonathan's card and the shared Starbucks card and where it went, Starbucks, in brief, a developer out on the West Coast took a picture of the card, shared it, and under the principle of pay it forward, put some money on it, and then it took on a life of its own until another developer wrote a script to just siphon off all the funds when it reached a certain level, at which point Starbucks shut it down. So how do we put these principles in play and then put them to positive business use?
Eliminating potential barriers to participation. We see that organizations, businesses love to complicate things, right? They have processes and they have rules and guidelines and regulations and compliance, and they keep adding complication to it. And what we've learned is that participation and the richness of the results of social businesses is directly proportional to how easy it is for workers and customers and suppliers to participate. And we often see that as a social business solution matures, it gets more complex. And of course, our latest data shows that, that you begin to lose the magic that makes it special. Don't lose the magic.
Don't lose the magic, man. We got like 2 minutes per tenant. Listen, engage continuously. We're in the era of big data. You're probably sick of hearing about big data so far, if not just that this weekend at South by alone. But you've got to have the right tools to make sense of what matters, to aggregate, and to act.
Don't issue press releases like Toyota did. Actually talk with regular people. The BP oil spill, the British Petroleum. Try to use traditional media to talk to everyone, and people decided to create their own accounts and actually represent BP the way they should have been actually talking to people in the way they would have listened. Former people actually listened to those channels and listened to anything BP had to say. Be human. This is social business.
We were working with a big bank, and before they launched on Twitter, the social media team had to get their tweets, a set of tweets approved. They had 75. Legal team comes back and said, all right, we kind of get this, we have some edits, but there's one that I just don't understand. It's colon, parentheses. What does this mean? Social team just, so speak like a human.
And just under the wire, the most effective social businesses processes aren't things that tacked onto the end, but when you rethink and embed social into the very business process itself. Again, all of these tenets were picked because we saw this over and over and over again with our clients and in the case examples in the book. And we saw that when people didn't just add a little bit of social media around the edges, but made that process fundamentally social, we have, again, specific examples of this, that's where the lift happened. That's where the real results took place.
Yeah, all social business efforts are going to die unless they're at the core. You make them important, you make them relevant and worthwhile, and drive business results.
So now it's your turn. We want you guys to participate. And so what else is missing here about what's really important, or what's happening next? We have some things we wish we would have added now.
We have to take